Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today it's May 4th, 2021. It is also the 22nd day of Iyar. It is Tuesday of the Parsha of Bahar Bechukosai, the last two Torah readings of the book of Leviticus. However, today we're going to focus not on the book of Leviticus, but as we do during this time, the period of Passover and Shavuos, where we learn and study about the Torah, the ethics of our fathers. We're going to learn about something unique in ethics of our fathers today. Just a quick reminder, as we do, is to remind you that tonight we have our JLI, It Can Happen, learning about the mission statement of the world and why it's about to be enveloped and closed, or not enveloped and closed, I should say, revealed to the world as we've been working on all this time of the purpose of God's creation. You can join us tonight at 7:30 p.m., via Zoom or in person. We'd love to see you. And that's going to be, again, tonight. It Can Happen. Join our JLI course. Back to our discussion here today. You know, generally when we talk about an argument, differences of opinion, it's not a good thing. We want everybody to get along. Everybody should have the same value system, same belief, same opinion. But as we know, and as we discussed many times before, the same way God created no two people to look alike, there are no two people that think alike. And to have everybody think alike wouldn't be healthy as well, because then we wouldn't be creativity. There won't be differences. There won't be different types of ideas that will become very monotheistic, very one type of monotone, one type of way of just thinking. Who likes that and who enjoys that? And not only that, it doesn't allow room for creativity and growth in the world. The very fact that two minds clash with one another gives us room to grow and understand and appreciate things which are beyond the scope of just our square imagination of what we believed and envisioned. The question is not if an argument is good or bad, is what becomes of the argument. What's the purpose of the argument? Any person who have ever studied Jewish law, Jewish thought, or Jewish theology knows that the entire Talmud, the entire Jewish law, is filled with differences of opinion. And sometimes the diverse opinions in there can be very sharp and antagonistic to one another, using very strong verbiage to one another. Take the classic. Back in Talmudic times, there were two schools of thought. There was the Shammai school of thought and the Hillel school of thought. And these two groups are almost at odds in many different areas in the Talmud. Generally, we follow the ruling like Beis Hillel. And many Hasidic scholars and mystics explain that this is not just a difference of opinion, it was a difference of attitude, a difference of culture, a difference of values, and also a difference of feelings of where they came from. But never was there any animosity from the school of Shammai to the school of Hillel. They were both studying the Torah. They were both learning God's Torah, God's wisdom. And they were both able to appreciate God's wisdom through their prism, through their purview of the way they viewed things. It wasn't a matter of debate. It was a matter of sharpening. You know, when you sharpen a knife, you rub one knife against each other to be able to make both of them sharp. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the school of Shammai and school of Hillel, when they had various of opinions, and many of them in opposing to one another, it wasn't because they were antagonistic to each other. It was to be able to bring out the best of each other, while both of them coming from different views and different prisms of seeing things. It is for this reason that the Talmud discusses in this week's Ethics of Our Father. The Mishnah says, any argument which is for the sake of heaven will eventually endure. And any argument which is not for the sake of heaven won't endure. What is an argument that's for the sake of heaven is an argument between Hillel and Shammai. What is an argument not for the sake of heaven is an argument of Korach and his faction. What is it telling us here? It's telling us over here the difference between why the argument was there placed. What's the difference between Shammai and Hillel when they were arguing, and the difference when Korach and his faction came to Moshe and said, Moshe, who made you in charge? When Shammai and Hillel were arguing, it wasn't that an argument by definition means something bad. On the contrary, it was two modalities of how to overcome an obstacle. both complementing each other. And therefore, once the halacha was ruled according to Hillel, even by Shammai followed what Beis Hillel said. That means, halachically, there was a decision that was made theologically and emotionally that the purview of Beis Hillel was correct. Now, just because halachically it was correct, it doesn't mean that automatically their system and theology all of a sudden disappeared. On the contrary, we still have opinions of Beis Shammai that are quoted in the Talmud. Not only that, most of the Talmud talks about questions back and forth to people who the halacha may not like either. And why do we mention those questions? Because by elucidating those questions, by understanding their reality, by understanding their thought process, we can better understand and appreciate what the halachic analysis is in its finality. On the other hand, an argument of Korach and his faction, they were not arguing to be able to better understand. They were not arguing to better see the way out of the tunnel. Korach and his faction didn't agree with Moses in principle. They disallowed godliness to come and enter into their argument. It wasn't a godly argument. It was an argument to try to disown God and not to allow God into their argument. And because of that, they had to, ultimately, that type of argument doesn't last. Because that argument is only absolute animosity. You know, in the argument of Korach, there were two types of people. And we're going to learn about it in the book of Numbers. There were people who were swallowed into the ground with Korach and his faction, where God says, remove yourself from those people. And then there were those 250 people who came into the holy temple to try bringing the incense, and they were expired because of that. There were two types of people. There were some people who just saw it as an ambitious jealousy that they had towards Moses. That had to be swallowed into the ground, destroyed, gotten rid of, because that had no source of holiness. It was absolute jealousy. Then there were people who had some type of quest for holiness, to be like Moses, but they didn't know how to direct it. And those people expired when they went with the incense and brought into the holy temple. Because even in Korach's faction, even in the disagreement there were those people who had some intention for holiness, though misguided. And therefore they went into the upper worlds. They were died in a more godly way. But the others, who their entire purpose was only to disown themselves, and did make disconnect, and it created animosity because of jealousy and hatred that they had for Moses, those people were swallowed into the ground. When we look at the concepts that exist in the world, when we look at arguments and differences of opinion, and we have to ask ourselves the question, why do I disagree with that person? Am I disagreeing with that person in theory, in theology? Is because he's a Democrat and I'm a Republican and we have different ways of looking at the world for the benefit of all citizens? Or is there something, an underlying hatred, animosity, jealousy, disappointment, name it what you want, against that individual, and therefore I am using my theology to be able to bring out my hatred? We must be very careful when we disagree with another person to ask ourselves what this argument is all about. Is it my feelings, or is it merely intellectual? Is it theology, or is it animosity? And if it's the latter, we must totally avoid it at all costs. But if it's in theology, we can be best friends and we work together. And in fact, the differences of opinion help us understand and appreciate for the greater good. My dear friends, I look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow at Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Have a wonderful day and stay well. All the best. And may we all get along happy, healthy, and well. Have a great day.